You ready to go, Adrian?
Yeah, I'm recording right now.
All right. So my name is Thomas Hoffecker. I gave this talk at DerbyCon, and I've done a little bit of updating. So there is some new content here. So here's a quick agenda. We're going to look at basically a couple of PKI implementations, what you as a pen tester can find out there. So disclaimer, here's one of the updates. I'm actually no longer with the government, so I've got a new job, but I don't speak on behalf of the government or my employer. And as I said at DerbyCon, I'm not going to talk about the SIPRnet hard token, which is basically also a smart card that's used for identity management. Who am I? Here's a little bit of my history. Started out back in '82, just a teen with an Atari 2600. And graduated to a VIC-20, and then I picked up some certs, worked at a couple of different places in DoD, and one of the things that I do outside of work in this play is I work with a rescue group for dogs for Westie specifically. So we foster dogs, and so if you're interested in making a donation there, you can go to the website and check it out. So I'm not a pirate or a ninja, shooter by birth, yay Second Amendment. Operator in training, and after you're done with your HFC donations, if you could pick one of these charities, these folks don't like to be recognized. They went after people like Osama bin Laden, and that's, everybody was like, oh, who's this SEAL Team 6? That's been around forever. The guy who actually founded it wrote a book, and so everybody treated that as something new, and oh, we never knew about this. It's been around forever. So here's some of the previous research that was done. The one at the top there, the crazies, I was working on this presentation, and when they posted that to Facepin, I'm like, great. So they're going to totally relook all the websites where PKI information is posted, where the certificate revocation lists are, and they're going to, block the stuff that I'm going to show here at DerbyCon. A couple others. Chris Palmer did an interview on Paul.com Security Weekly talking about some of the issues with the CAs, and then of course he mentioned the EFF SSL Observatory, which they went through and they mapped the entire internet. Moxie Marlinspike, of course, with his stuff on SSL, and then Honest Ahmed's certs and used cars. Which is kind of interesting because they tried to make the case for, hey, we want to be a certificate authority and we want to be added to Mozilla's root CA list. So just a quick refresher. Your public certificate is public. You use that to have encrypted content sent to you. There's a mathematical relationship between your private and public key. You can look at those URLs and get some more info on that. So we've got the certificate authorities. They provide the root certificate sort of out of band in your browser. You don't go download those unless you need to add something. Again, for the CAs, the more root certificates, the more dollars they get from, that they have to pay to Microsoft. They preload them, Apple, Mozilla. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've been in networking for a while, is when the internet first started becoming popular, the barrier for entry for an SSL certificate was $400 or $500. You had to be verified and submit a business license. Now you can do the domain verification, and within 15 minutes you can have your cert. So a lot of people that I've done training with on PKI, they refer to it as smoke and mirrors. There's a three-party trust. If you don't trust that third party or you don't know how trustworthy they are, you're really, blind to possibly, wind up trusting someone who you really shouldn't be. Very, very bottom, they don't last forever. The CRLs, already mentioned it, is basically a list of certificates that have been revoked. There was a major problem with the CRLs getting too large, so this thing called OCSP was invented. And then sponsored by the number 3, an SSL strip, Moxie Marlinspike, actually put in, and browsers behave differently as far as a response to OCSP. And as long as the number 3 came back through, of course, HTTP unencrypted stream, he could basically tell the browser, hey, everything's cool with the certificate. This is the certificate you're looking for, sort of like, the Jedi mind trick. EFF did this project in conjunction with a couple of other folks, and they found that there's a whole bunch of CAs out there that aren't really part of, the public ones that we know of, Verisign, some of the other large ones. And so what you can find is all these, root CAs out there that, are sort of autonomous and have to be loaded after the fact. So what you can do is you can use this information as part of your normal recon. So when you get your whois data or you map your, the websites, you can look for this information, you can gather intel, and you can footprint the folks. So if you look at the SSL certificates, you can get the CRL location. You can see if they support LDAP or if they just support HTTP. And one of the examples that I cite, you can see that not only do they have an internet-facing CA, but they also have an inward-facing CA, and they happen to publish the CRLs to the external-facing CRL listing. Here's some of the stuff we can find. You can possibly check for email validity. If they issue PKI certificates for signing and encrypting email, if you, let's say, harvest a large number of email addresses and you can do an LDAP query against that certificate authority and you can find that email certificate is listed as expired, chances are pretty good that email address isn't going to work. So without sending anything to that email address, you can determine if that email address is possibly still valid. A couple other things that you can find what type of CA that they're using. You can also find what type of policies they have. You'll find stuff in those policies like the protection that is afforded to the certificate authority, the actual server. You can also see what purposes they use those for, and also it may give you an idea of what, how well they they protect that infrastructure. Again, social engineering possibilities. If you can find a certificate that's about to expire or has expired, you can use that and tell someone, hey, I need to send this to you encrypted, or this is an attachment. I know by policy we're supposed to encrypt this, but hey, my certificate's already expired. So just trust the certificate, or don't bother trying to get me to send it to you encrypted, and ignore that the certificate has expired. And if you could really compromise the PKI infrastructure, you got the keys to the kingdom, everything else would be gravy. One of the key things here also is there may be a type of directory type service, or think like a GAL, that you can use also for retrieving certificates and finding information. Dealing with the CRLs, Sans had a great little story about the stuff that they did with the DigiNotar, where they looked at all the expired certs. I'm probably going to throw some more effort into research on this and start looking at the CRLs and what you can specifically do with those for some of the civilian side government agencies. So I already talked a little bit about the certificate policies. Just going out to Google and looking for that type of stuff, you can find the different certificate policies, what the rules are, how, let's say how long the certificates are valid for, what kind of key strength that they use. There's all kinds of good information there. So I already sort of mentioned this one. This is SAIC, they're a large defense contractor. They were found in the EFF's SSL Observatory, and they're right there. This is the entire document here, and that's basically a zoomed in version of what they have. So this is their home page. If you go through here, you can find that they have a section for employees. Anything dealing probably with employees is going to be encrypted. And so you wind up going to the employee tools. You have stuff like Outlook Web. You've got your various HR tools. And as you can see in this shot, you've got a website that specifically is issued to by an SSL certificate that's an O of SAIC, an organizational unit of CSYS, and you can see that it is their actual public issuing CA. And so looking at that actual certificate, the chain goes up to GTE Cyber Trust, and then here you'll see the pki.saic.com is where the CRLs are published. So here's an actual screenshot of what's in there. You'll notice that they have the two different namings on the CRLs. You've got both the private CA and the public issuing. Ideally, I think they should have that separated, mainly because you can now know by the fact that you can see those CRLs that they've got an internal facing certificate authority also. So looking at the actual private one, you can see that the actual CA that they're using is Microsoft, so they're probably using Active Directory to issuing those certificates. And they're a sub-CA. And again here, you'll see the information of where you can get the information as far as downloading the CRLs. One of the interesting things is that if you go to the AIA website, it redirects to a portion of their website that talks about their PKI infrastructure. And you'll also notice that looking up at Netgraph, you'll see that they use IIS-6, and most likely it's through a load balanced F5. Looking on the federal side, you look at DISA, just a quick search for DoD PKI. You wind up running into a whole bunch of information. Specifically here is the DoD root website, where you can download root certificates and other fun stuff, as you'll see later. One of the things that IASE, which is the Information Assurance website, they do have some training. I specifically looked at that, and they teach you all the interesting stuff about the Common Access Card. And one of the comments after DerbyCon was, oh wow, I didn't realize that that training was out there. Here we're treating what the CAC does and what information it contains and how you're supposed to use it, as fairly sensitive, but yet it's out here for anybody to download. So basically, the CAC was originally prior to HSPD12 and the PIV type smart cards was out there. The newer versions actually are fully PIV compliant. So you have a PIN and you have to assure your identity, proof of citizenship, and it's basically for DoD contractors, employees, and then of course active duty military. What you need to use for the CAC, of course, you got to have the hardware, the CAC reader. You got to update your root certificate list, and then you got to have the middleware for the client. So on the hardware side, eBay, excellent repository whenever you're trying to buy hardware. There's all kinds of different versions for whatever you want to do. So getting the hardware is not hard at all. The middleware is available. There's a website, militarycad.com, goes into how to enable CAC card for Mac or Linux, and they have links there to websites where you can actually buy the software online for the middleware. If you have one of the latest PIV cards, the Overture 128, you can actually use the built-in drivers on Windows 7. The other thing is if you're looking for the middleware, there's OpenSC, which I've not worked with. Your Google Foo, you could probably find the middleware also for download. So there's 35 bucks that will get you the latest version. And on Windows 7, you'll need Active Client 6.2. Another possibility is lightweight portable security system, which is basically a live CD that DoD has written basically for teleworking. So you just pop the CD in, attach your USB CAC reader, boot up, use your smart card, and that way they don't have to worry about anything that may also be on your, your host's regular operating system. So here's some more of the PKI training. They basically teach you how to encrypt the email. So one of the things that you're supposed to do is when you have various types of information, such as a hyperlink, financial information, basically any type of PII, they want you to sign and encrypt it. So one of the things that they show here is what you should be looking for when you deal with an encrypted email or signed email. The digital signature, you have the signed by. Ideally, these two should match. that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, as I'll show later. They also have a piece of software called Desktop Validator from Tumbleweed, which basically goes through and caches certificates that it pulls down. So here's basically a screenshot of what you'll see in Outlook if you wind up with a certificate that is expired or not trusted. And here they talk more about what type of information you should be sending encrypted. One of the things is these certificates, of course, you have to find a place to get them. And so they have a couple of different means of getting them. Ideally, if you can't go and download, if someone sends you a signed email, you'll have the certificate then. So for within your organization, the certificates are published into the Gallon Exchange. And if you have to go outside your organization, you either have to get the certificate by someone sending it you a signed email, or they have what's called GDS, which is Global Directory Service. So here's basically, they give you the procedure how to go out there to the website, and I'll have screenshots of that later. So here they talk more about having the yellow and the little blue padlock on there to make sure and show you that the actual email is signed and encrypted. And you can't actually send an encrypted email without signing it. One of the other benefits of the CAC is that there is an automated key recovery. So standard for government employees, the CACs are valid for 3 years. For contractors, it's usually 1 year. So, you know, that time when your CAC expires, you get a new one. You go back to your computer, you connect to the automated key recovery site. You, based upon your current CAC, you can download a recovery certificate so you can read all your old encrypted mail. One of the fun things about this training is you notice the fine print here up at the top. Anyone may use this product in any manner for any purpose whatsoever. So I decided, hey, that's kind of neat, so nobody can sue me or basically go home after me for using this information. Most of the actual training that's up on the website at IASC has this phrase in there. Actually, I noticed there was a Twitter post yesterday by Deviant Olem, and they have this new training called Cyber Protect, and it's a simulation where you wind up having a network that you're protecting, and I haven't gone through it yet, but it's supposed to be like a game, and it has the same clause at the end, and needless to say, his reviews weren't that great. So the PKI training is not mandatory. As part of FISMA, you have to take annual security awareness training. That does teach you about spam. It goes into that emails should be signed. This is actually what it looks like. They give you these different rooms with different scenarios. And then the email one specifically that I identified here is you've got the little red ribbon, but the actual line for the sign by is missing. So people aren't getting the visibility of what they need to see to actually look for an encrypted email that's properly signed. So the message to the user is signed email is good, regardless of who the actual certificate came from. So I equate this to the little box that the yellow padlock you get in IE, and then there's that little pop-up that says, hey, there's something wrong with the certificate. You just click continue, and the help desk tell people to do it. So I equate this to the same thing. It gives a false sense of security. A little bit more on some different things. I mentioned the Enterprise Directory Service. Deers Rapids is a system that houses the information and is used to generate the CACs. I would say that would be a prime target for folks looking to get into credential stealing or looking for PII. You can get more information on the CAC. One of the things is in order to go to the DoD websites to download the certificate, the root certificates, you have to actually already have them loaded. And so there's actually a non-NIPRNet connected website where you can actually go download them. And they make a handy little installer where you just double click it and it installs all the certificates. So that's what an actual CAC will look like. I found that online actually, so I didn't make that myself. Okay, so this is the actual certificate from the DoD PKI site. You'll see that the distribution points for the CRLs are there. A little bit zoomed in. One of the big things is with the requirements from HSPD 12 and the PIV card, all this stuff has to interoperate together. So you can take a person who works, let's say, for Department of Energy that has a PIV card and give them access to a DoD website. The certificate, there's what's called a federal bridge, and what it allows people to do is cross-sign between different organizations. So what you basically have is a federated identity management. And one of the things I found very interesting was here recently they talked about the national, cyber identity. Everyone would have to have a means to identify themselves on the internet. So the federal government has already done this for itself, and the question would be is are they going to mandate or somehow allow people? The conversation has died off about that, and they said it would be voluntary, so who knows where that's going to go. Here's some of the folks that have cross-signed. Not only do you have other government agencies, you also have some private contractors. You've got your Lockheed Martins, your Northrop Grummons that also participate. There's also some states. You've got Colorado and Kansas that are listed there also. So all these folks can use their identity certificates that they've got to identify them to websites and basically connect up as long as they have the permission to do so. Here's some of the other policies that are out there. I had mentioned GDS and JEDS. A quick Google search on that winds up with this page at the main DISA website. And one of the things that I had done is, as a government employee, I had to get, past, my presentation to the operational security folks. They basically told me, hey, if it's on a for official use only website, you really can't show it, but the information owner is DISA because it's their website. I contacted their public affairs office, their PAO, and asked them to provide me any type of feedback. The only thing I ever got back from them was, yeah, we're looking at it, yeah, we're taking it into consideration, we'll get back to you. I sent them a follow-up email and said, hey, I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to black stuff out so that people's email addresses or phone numbers aren't exposed. I never heard back from them, unfortunately. So looking at closer thing here. So it provides a DoD-wide search capability of names, emails, and public keys. So this is where you could actually do some searching. And actually the access to the 401 site is no longer available with an ECA certificate. So what's an ECA certificate? It's basically certificates that are issued for a fee by third parties that allow, defense, industry partners and contractors to get access to DoD websites. Not necessarily all of them, but it will allow you access to JEDS. So there's different levels of assurance that you can get. You can get soft certificates, and then there's different barriers of entry, as I call them, for the identity proofing of the, to obtain the certificate. Couple of the vendors that I looked at, Verisign and then ORC. So part of this was looking at what the vendors offer, and when I opened the ORC website, first thing that caught my eye here is a social engineering opportunity, and that was this thing right here. Walk-ins are welcome. So I spent quite a bit of time down there, and I looked up the address of where this place was, and I looked up the cost. So for $99, you can actually get the soft certificate. If you wind up wanting the hardware version of it, the smart card, that's going to run you $169 for 1 year. You actually also have to pay on top of that the fee for the actual smart card itself. I think they charge you like $6. A little bit of information about them. They also support civilian federal agencies. When I walked into the place, one of the first things I saw was this giant poster. Do you need access to sensitive government facilities was the headline across it. And then they said, you know, use our identity management. And it basically showed a civilian version of the CAC card that they would issue to you. So here's a little bit of an advertisement about them, some of their you know, different claims to fame here. They were one of the first in all those categories. Their product, I think that they, that gives the access, you know, the sense of government facility is the PIV Total ID package. You know, they'll basically host your PKI, you know, HSPD 12 PIV compliant solution, and then allow you to issue certificates for those. So here's an example. This is like a smaller version of the fix of the poster that they had. So then I looked where I had to go to do my walk-in, and so I punched that into Google Maps. And if you're from the Northern Virginia area, this is actually Route 66, and it's actually the same building as the NRA. So you'll see businesses at this address, National Firearms Museum. A couple more views of the building. So the actual facility is right there on the second floor. I took that picture from the parking lot. Well, I walked in without an appointment. And one of the things I attempted to find out talking to the person there that was working to issue me the certificate is, hey, how does this work? You know, does my machine talk to your servers? I tried to elicit where the actual servers were. I wasn't able to do that, but based upon some of the information as far as the network address, I believe that those are on site. A couple other things that I was able to find out is a lot of the soft certificates, they've had instances where those get stolen. And then people from Cybercom through DISA, who the ECA program is sponsored by, will call them up and say, hey, you need to revoke this certificate. But he said that none of the users have ever called up and said, hey, my certificate stopped working, what's going on? And then, of course, one of the systems is called JPass. If you Google that, you'll wind up finding out that it's used for verification of background investigations and security clearances. And so they're having to move that to smart card login. So one of the things that I tried to do is take some pictures from inside the facility with my cell phone. When I was sat down in the room where they issue certificates, he took my information, verified the identity, you know, using my passport, my driver's license. Then he said, hey, I got to go in the back room. I got to go generate the certificate. And he said, you know, it'll probably take me about 10 minutes. And so he said, if you know, if you want, break room's right next door. Go have, we got some water in there. There's coffee. You know, just relax. I'll be back in, you know, in a few minutes. So there's a picture of their break room. Unfortunately, I didn't want to use the flash, figuring that would attract attention, and so the pictures didn't turn out very clear. One of the things that you probably can maybe make out a little bit is there's a wireless access point back there. I actually was able to detect 2 of them. They were both protected by WPA2 with AES. One of them was accessible. I believe it's the one from the window out in the parking lot. So you would have a means of external entry if you could somehow manage to break that key. This is the actual machine that the certificate was issued and written to my smart card. So what happened is after he came back, excuse me, he opened a web browser and with the active identity client certificate, you know, software, the client certificate was actually written to the smart card. As you can see, it's a Windows XP machine. There's quite a few patches that that need to be installed. I didn't have the phone plug, but I bought one at DerbyCon because this would have been like the perfect place to put it, although I wouldn't have done so considering I didn't have any type of permission or get out of jail free card to do that. But I would think that if they actually saw this, that they would seriously reconsider the way that they issue certificates to people and just not leave them alone with their equipment. This is the actual network. It's address space that they get from Verizon Business. There's a couple of different hosts that you'll wind up dealing with as far as accessing their website, then the ECA website, and then the directory services gateway. Scanning their /24, you'll wind up with some interesting ports that are open to pager service. They also had a lot of their hosts were actually filtered with Nmap set, and I believe a lot of those were workstations, so I don't know what type of firewall they have. They are required to have one as per the DoD policy. This is the actual policy for ECA certificate providers. One of the things is as long as you adhere to this policy, you have to submit a request, and there's really not a reason that anyone else can't become a ECA certificate provider. You just have to abide by these rules, and then of course you have to be audited by some of the folks at DoD. Physical security, a lot of common sense stuff. The CA hardware is only used for the CA. You got to have safes. You got to have a facility that's protected by an IDS if it's left unattended. One of the things I figure is nobody probably will try to break in or do anything there, because there's the stuff of value in that facility is probably not as great as downstairs in the NRM museum. They actually do have guards there that are there all the time. Looking at Verisign, one thing I did try with them is the actual soft certificate, which you can accomplish in a couple of different ways. You can either do trusted agent, or you can go the way of a notary. And this process works if you do not have a company affiliation. You can put unaffiliated in the request for the company. When I did the actual smart card certificate, they didn't allow me to do that, so I used actually a corporation that I'd registered a couple of years ago. So if you do decide to go the route here, unaffiliated is the way to go, because that way they can't tie it back to a corporation. And once you get all your stuff notarized, the form filled out, you just send it to that snail mail address. They will then send you an email that you can come back and retrieve your actual certificate. So I did that. Here's the actual thing that you wind up printing out and taking down to your notary. It's not very sophisticated. The notary requirements vary by state. The barrier of entry to become a notary isn't all that great. So here in West Virginia, you got to be 18. You can be a non-U.S. citizen, which is different than some of the other states. Generally, you can't be a convicted felon. And here, you have to have an actual $1,000 surety bond. And you actually have to mail your application back, or the letter that they send you, and you have to stamp it with your official notary stamp, which wasn't required by either Virginia or Kentucky. Virginia has electronic notary public, which I have not actually looked into. A journal is not required. And one of the things I thought about in this whole process was, okay, so Verisign gets that form, that piece of paper that says, yeah, we know for a fact that Thomas's passport, was a U.S. passport, and we saw his driver's license. How would they ever verify that this guy was really a notary? And I thought, okay, it's a UPS store, and they could call there and they could find out if I had something notarized. But if the journal or the logbook isn't required, how would they ever know? They could just say, they could fax it back there and say, hey, was this officially notarized by you? So there's possibilities there that someone nefarious could, fake the notary requirement also. One of the interesting things is you do not have to be a U.S. citizen. You can be one of the 5 I's, so you could be in the UK. You could be Chinese and request an ECA certificate. So Kentucky had different requirements. So you've got your ECA certificate, your middleware. So let's look at some of the things. And here's one of the things that I always find amusing is these conferences that they have. They always announce who the speakers are and where they work. So going to JEDS, you wind up logging into it, you punch in your PIN, you get the little warning, and so you punch in Keith Alexander and you wind up getting the results back. I did black out the results because I figured that was the only appropriate thing to do, but as you can see there, he's got a couple of different email addresses that are tied to certificates. One's from the Army and the other two are from NSA. So looking at his overall information for the entire contact, you can see that, you know, he is at NSA. You can see his phone number is 301-688. He's at 9800 Savage Road, which is the public address for NSA. One of the things that's interesting is you have the different sources that JEDS gets feeds from. So if you try to get an AKO account, you have to be sponsored, but yet by this means you can get the information that people put into AKO about themselves. And I show another case where a retired general actually puts in his home address, and you know, you guys all know what you can do as far as stalking on the internet once you have someone's address. So looking at his other two certificates, these are soft certificates. You'll notice here the type of certificate that's listed is hardware CAC, and on these they're both software. So the reason he probably had these two certificates is probably because the software certificate, based upon the validity dates, he may have lost it, or they may have forgotten the actual passphrase to access it. Somebody else that was listed there, James Clapper, the head of ODNI, he's also, have his email address. One of the things you can do is once you retrieve it, the actual certificate can be downloaded, and then if it's a hardware-based CAC certificate, you can send that person email, and only that person can open that, because they cannot pull the private certificate off that CAC. I've actually talked to, who was it, Major Malfunction, Adam Laurie, and he said there's no way that he knows of to pull a private certificate off a smart card. So I've looked into it, done some reading. I've not found any way. I don't believe that it can't be done because the actual certificates are put on there with just a machine and the middleware. There's nothing special about it. They use the same type of reader as you use every day, so there's got to be a way to reverse that process, hopefully. I've also tried looking at senior leaders. I tried to find the former Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. Couldn't find him, nor Leon Panetta. I did find William Lynn, so there's Panetta. The only reason I think he's in there is because he was in a previous position. So again, he's got a CAC. You could send him email that only he could open. Some other folks that you may know, Bradley Manning. I heard some people talking about this the other day. They said, yeah, he walked out of a secure area with a CD that was rewritable media. One of the things that never ceases to amaze me is actually if you go back and you read the information from the stories about the guy at the CIA who was a spy. He literally walked out with shopping bags full of printed classified documents and walked past the front desk to his car. So the ability to leave a secure facility really with lots of stuff is not unheard of, and it's been done time and time again. So there's a couple of Bradley Mannings out there. You can actually access his information. I actually went back and looked this up. There's been no update. I do remember in some of my research that some of the feeds to JEDS from the various other places are broken. So that certificate is still listed out there. He technically is still active duty Army, although he's confined. So I don't know if they've issued him new identification, because on his actual identification it would be by now expired. So that was a simple query. We can do queries based upon name. We can do queries based upon rank. But one of the things is JEDS actually wants you to punch in the first 3 characters for different things. So they do allow you just to search by 1 character for the middle initial. And as you can see, there's a couple of tests right there. So obviously folks are looking at this and seeing what they can do and have looked at the logs to figure out what is going on. So again, last name doesn't work. So you can also query on the email address. So you can do contain starts with, ends with. So if you have the capability to search with this parameter, ideally you would want to search on something that you're going to wind up getting hits on. And any ideas for a good query? Well, if we know that we're looking for people that have .mil email addresses, we would just use .mil. So these are the results, but I'll show them to you. So what we're looking for right here is for any general officer that would be 4-star, and these would be their names, these would be their information that's been put in, their email addresses. So what you've done here is you've basically just done a query for like the C-level executives for the entire, Department of Defense. And my question would be is, how much of a success rate would you have if you sent them a signed encrypted email, okay, that only they can read, and you sent either malware or some other type of link, with a social engineering attack? From some of the previous examples, you could, for General Alexander, you could say, hey, I heard your, the talk that you gave at the Geointelligence Conference, really like this, this, and this. Here's a story I've written about it, and provide them the link. Chances are he'll probably click on it. So there was a discussion with some of the folks that I talked to in the OPSEC department about, hey, this is kind of sensitive information, you probably shouldn't be showing this. If you look at, all general officers have to be approved by Congress when they get nominated, so that information is out there publicly. So I really don't have too much of a problem showing this information. One of the things that I did in my research is I said, okay, great, so you can do .mil. What about some of the other extensions? So for a while I was able to do .com. There were a lot of Gmails. I then did an entire retrieval on any email address that ends with .com, and I actually found this lieutenant colonel who had his information in there. He was, what was it exactly? Tribal relations specialist. So he had his email address in there for his Gmail account. He had his phone number. And so I looked up the address. The address was in Tampa, Florida. And it actually, looking at it, it was the headquarters for CENTCOM, Central Command, which of course is dealing with Iraq and Afghanistan. And unfortunately, I didn't take screenshots or write down, but I was going to show that one, saying, hey, look, if you're going to use a Gmail account for your CAT card, you may not want your association known. Maybe he's doing undercover type of work. So plastering that stuff in a directory may not be the best idea either. It no longer works. It stopped working before DerbyCon, so somebody's looking at actual logs. So you can narrow the search down to specifically to the Army or the Air Force. Doing a quick logic check, you look for generals in the Navy, those don't exist, but you can also look at the admirals. You can look at the Marine Corps, and so then I specifically looked at General McChrystal, who's already retired, and you can also look specifically at Pentagon.mil. So General Cartwright, he's also retired. Here's some of the information that you can get publicly. So, there's information out there. Here's some of the information that you could have, used. You can send him snail mail. You can call him on the phone. Looking at other ways to get information, all of the major commands, they'll have their PAO, their public relations. This is who we are. This is our leadership. This is what they've done. So looking at SOCOM, Special Operations Command, you wind up seeing who their commander is. You can wind up looking him up. Wikipedia, he's actually retired. He was the first Navy SEAL to get the 3- and 4-star rank. And so taking his information, you can look him up on JEDS with no problem. And so this is the information again. here you're getting information from AKO, which he had to manually input without actually having the requirement for an AKO account. So that actually does map back to the actual address on MacDill for the SOCOM headquarters. And it works at other levels. If you want to go down the ranks, you can look at kernels. So here's some of the examples of people that have just yahoo.com listed as the email address that they can receive and send encrypted email from. Gmail. I also looked at for other government agencies, so there's a whole bunch of people, 39 of them to be exact, that use their nsa.gov email address. This is an actual general that's retired. About a year or so ago, there was that big scandal about the mentoring program that retired generals work with. And you know, they would mentor people in, let's say, a certain command, and then they would also have positions, you know, on a board of directors for a defense contractor, and they were saying that that was a conflict of interest. So he put everything literally in his AKO information. So literally, you can wind up stalking him to the point you can tell he's still got a hardware CAC. So he's got the CAC with the green stripe down it. Doesn't reflect his rank, but it's interesting how they still show his rank here actually in AKO since he's retired. But there's his actual house. This is the guy who gave back the military facilities in Heidelberg. That's the general area where I grew up in Germany, so that's why I specifically picked him. So JEDS is great, but you know, it's not very efficient to lending itself to doing queries. If you could script this stuff, it would be great. They tell you here you can access it through LDAP-S. One of the problems is if you use the smart card, that's generally not supported by most LDAP clients. So you would have to contact them to get access. Your Google Foo will help you. Here's the requirements on another website that's not protected in any way for authentication. So you can do query, but you have to have the certificate. I will probably be looking into hopefully writing some scripts that automate this process. So great, you spend money to get access to this stuff. Don't want to spend any money. The crazies missed some stuff. Remember I said that there was the PKI certificate, there was a query. You wind up at this website. You wind up clicking some of the options, specifically the requesting of a server certificate. You don't want a certificate, you don't want to revoke it, but you can retrieve certificates and you can search for them specifically. So what you can do is you can search for the common name. So here's the actual certificate for Cybercom's website. A couple more just looking for VPN. The other day I tried accessing this and I wasn't able to access it anymore, and I thought that they had blocked the host based upon, you know, from external access from the internet, but that turned out not to be the case. I must have just gotten an IP address that they had, you know, blocked because of some other type of bad activity. So you can search on all kinds of things. You can search on when the, you know, the dates of validity, when it expires. So if you look at something that's expiring here in the next 30 days, you could use that for social engineering attack. If you look for something that's just expired, you have the possibilities maybe for a man in the middle. The one problem with this is it limits you to 99 query results. So let's look at doing something worthwhile, some phishing. There's different places where you can get free SSL certs for your email. You can do your own CA. There's ways documented to do that. Why would you want to encrypt and use an email for phishing? One, the antivirus software won't be able to decrypt it, so you can send an extension that, let's say, they prohibit. So if you want to send a zip file and they don't allow zip files to go through their AV gateway, by encrypting it you can. You can also possibly bypass some of the spam protections because the content's going to be encrypted. The subject and the headers won't, so you'll have to make sure that those are clean and can pass, you know, any type of the rules. Ideally, you'd want to be able to just create one certificate or pay for one certificate and then use it for multiple email addresses. With Outlook, it won't let you do it, but you can do it with Gmail and one of the plugins, and this is what it would look like. So here's the actual configuration of the plugin. You select the certificates that you want to use. One of the things that I found interesting, and I've not tried this, is including the root CA. What I theorize is that if you include all the information, you could probably do a self-signed certificate with the root certificate attached. And I haven't tested this, but I bet it would pass through with no problem and you wouldn't get any type of warnings that the certificate isn't trusted. So one thing you do have to do is you can't do it. The sending of the email actually goes through the SMTP gateway at Gmail. So this is what it looks like. You wind up with the plugin. The green box says that you're sending the email, and what it looks like when it sends it. So here's what it looks like when it arrives in my inbox in Outlook. You get the little red ribbon, and then of course you have the red ribbon again. But what you'll notice is you've got the sign by and the from do not match. If you remember from the eye awareness training, there was no focus in basically making people aware of that sign by and from needs to match. So most of the folks would probably ignore that, not be worried about it. If you made it, look like it's very close to the other one, you could probably not have any problems getting somebody to take your email and consider it signed and valid. Even with the little checkbox, the only thing that does is produce a line across the screen and changes the ribbon to like a little warning thing. That checkbox, like I said, doesn't do a whole lot. And what I did here to get my machine to think the certificate is invalid, I set the date back to the 1st of April. And you'll wind up getting this as a result. Only thing you get is a little message there that the digital signature isn't valid. If you do not have the little warn me about errors checked, that dialog box will never pop up. So the message will open, no problem. So even if you open the message, this is what it looks like. You have the red line and you got the little exclamation mark there. But I mean, what does that tell the user? It doesn't tell the user anything. There's really nothing there that says, don't open this, don't click any of the links. It's like IE when they had it, before version 8, I think it was, where they didn't, when it was an invalid certificate, you just click continue and it went on. So additions to existing tools that would facilitate this is Chris John Riley's actually adding the roll your own CA where it will automatically generate in real time all the certificates to do that. He says it does it in about 15 seconds. He's got it in his own SVN repository. Carlos Perez currently has a ticket. I haven't checked on this and if what progress has been made in the last 3 weeks. And you can basically get, once you got Meterper loaded, it will basically push new root CAs into the certificate stores. And ideally, maybe if there's a desire for it, Dave can include support for PKI, encrypted email, and signed email into SET. This is another project I've launched. Like I said, I started a new job here, and one of the things I'm amazed by is people just go out in public and have their badges purely visible, so you could probably recreate a badge and pass through physical security without any type of problem. And it basically was inspired by one of the chapters in the No Tech Hacking book. Do we have time for a demo?
Yes.
Okay. So, let me...
Do you have black vans parked outside your house very often?
No. I live in a cul-de-sac, I'd notice. So, like I mentioned, the
house been under construction for a while.
Yeah.
Plumber or florist or whatever.
So this is the actual website I was talking about. It's publicly accessible to anyone. It is labeled as FOUO. So one of the things I was playing with last night is in one of the talks that was given, I think it was either at DEF CON or one of the CCC meetings, was a lot of CAs have issued certificates either with private address space or with local hosts. So here you can see there's 2 certificates issued with local hosts, and they're still valid. I don't know why anybody would do this, but like I said, it's out there. Let me see here. Private address space. So here's a couple keys that use the common name of the actual IP address. All right. So one of the other terms that I thought of was SSO, single sign-on. So plenty of that out there. You know how long those are valid for. Then, and I did most of these last night just thinking of different possibilities. I said, okay, there shouldn't be any commercial websites, or if there are, there's a few. And you get some, you know, different hits because of there's .com for the com staff. But you do wind up with some. So here's a commercial vendor. Why the DoD is issuing them a certificate, I don't know. Now, ideally, these cases here for these commercial websites, that's what the ECA certificates are for. So here you know that National Geospatial Intelligence Agency has some type of presence at State College. So that's probably some type of Penn State program, maybe. Lockheed Martin. I did find one. So here's commissaries.com. That's the supermarket for the, you know, for the troops. I did actually find one for Portal, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but I actually looked up the domain. The domain was no longer valid, so you could go in and register the domain, and the certificate's like valid until 2014, and either the company gave up the domain name or they got bought out and they never re-registered the domain. But you could, if you could regenerate the private part of that certificate, which would be extremely hard, you'd have to, you know, brute force that and get it somehow to match the private. But you could generate another certificate and just say, hey, you know, we lost, you know, the certificate, or this is an updated certificate, and basically people would think, okay, it's signed by, you know, the DoD, or they at least provided some type of signature for it. So another one that I thought of, and this is the one that's truly, I thought, oh my God, if this stuff is out there. Yeah, did I mistype?
Is there a preceding space?
No. I had hits on this. So, let's do something else. I had hits on this also. Either that or they've looked at the logs already. So I did find a whole bunch of SIP proxies. but I guess it's not showing them.
Should be.
I also look for stuff like demo. Lots of hit on, demo. I tried looking for dev or developer. So, you wouldn't know. Here we go. So SIP core. Yep. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff out there. Like I said, I tried demo. There were a whole bunch of hits. So VPN. So, I mean, anything that you could think of, you could probably find out there. One of the interesting things, or one of the things I think you could probably use for a pen test assessment, is you wind up with stuff like, and I found this, the DS stands for Directory Services. Okay, so looking at any hosts in these, I also did a search for domain controller, or DC, which turned out interesting hits, is the actual DS is Directory Services, so that's their AD implementation. So these are actual servers or other hosts located at military installations. Now, the thing about these is you can't actually resolve these in DNS because of the split DNS architecture, so that their internal hosts aren't listed out there. But what you can derive from this is some of the domain names that you can get based upon the certificates that were issued. So, let me just try it again. Let's see. I actually did find one of the entries with SIP proxy was actually resolvable from the outside. I didn't try to port scan it to see if I could connect to it on SIP, but here's the different SIP proxies that are out there. And of course, those don't resolve in DNS, so those are only internal. So if you could somehow get a DNS query from the inside, you could resolve those. Any questions? All right, thank you much.